welcome to ReRoll, your SideQuest Bloodbowl week in review. Both of these teams entered this week on 1 point, and were each looking to claim their first win. The Dwarves received and made a quick break down the right hand side of the field, hoping to grab an early lead. It's clear that Adicol learned from his game with the Orcs last week, as he made a decisive one-die blitz successfully onto the ball, which he eventually recovered and managed to stall out the remainder of the Dwarves' attack on their receiving drive. The second half began with a very shallow kick from the Dwarves, resulting in an intensive scrap, with repeated blocks and blitzes on the ball carriers and possession changing every couple of turns. Eventually, a Hobgoblin managed to wriggle free and make a dash along the left-hand touchline. Unfortunately, a failed blitz from a Chaos Dwarf blocker left the Cynical Slayers with an opportunity to do a one-die blitz of their own. Clearly Nuffle was in their favour, or they bribed some bystanders, as not only was the Hobgoblin surfed, but the ball was beautifully passed from the crowd straight to one of the Dwarves' open runners. With casualties taking their toll and the ball suddenly in their half, there was little the Yuletide lads could do but look on in misery as the Slayers runner dashed down the pitch to score the only touchdown of the game and earning them their first win of the season. Clash of the Titans was the name of this game, with the two top teams, both unbeaten, battling it out to claim the top spot. Arguably the two highest strength teams in this league, perhaps it would come down to who was the most flexible and agile in order to overcome such a similar foe. The Khemri received a deep kick, but despite attempting some early pressure, a little bad luck burnt the Reptiles' rerolls early, and eventually the Khemri started to make a push down the left-hand flank. The Lizards responded with a good screen, encasing the Khemri's cage and slowing their grind to a halt. The Khemri decided to give their passing game yet another shot, even after their feeble attempts last week, but it had about the same amount of success. A lucky bounce and some unexpected awareness from a Tomb Guardian though, left the Khemri in a surprisingly stronger position than planned. They eventually cleared the way, and after some GFIs the Tomb Guardian waddled his way into the end zone for a 1-0 Khemri lead at half time. The lurking Lizardmen looked to try and cripple the Khemri in the final turn of the first half, but it somewhat backfired when the Saurus was not only sent off, but the Tomb Guardian he had just injured successfully regened. Receiving in the second half, the Skinks made a scrappy getaway up the field, and despite some key blitzes to dislodge the ball, they were able to recover it time and again to equalise the game on turn 13. With only 4 turns left, the Khemri decided to pick up the pace well as best they could and go for the win. A blitzer launched behind the Lizardmen line, and after a few failed attempts at recovering the ball, the Khemri had but 1 turn left. Once again they had to resort to their oh so pitiful passing game. However, the Khemri dug deep and did the impossible. Getting a turn 16 touchdown to win 2-1 and showing the Lizardmen that these old bones deserve to be on top. After a crushing defeat last week against the lurking Lizardmen, the Goblins looked to redeem themselves against their old rivals, the Orcs, and they didn't get off to a bad start either. With the chainsaw finally doing some work, they inflicted several injuries onto the Orcs, including forcing them to revive a dead Black Orc. Unfortunately though, the Orcs returned in kind and also injured several Goblin players. The Gobbos ran the ball up the pitch but got caught in a prolonged melee in the centre, resulting in several Orc blitzes and a menagerie of both downs, causing the ball to bounce all over the place. And from that point on, the Goblins were never quite able to recover the ball and ended their receiving half without a touchdown. During the second half, despite injuring more Orc players, the toll was really beginning to show on the Goblins' side. The Orcs broke down the left-hand side of the field and despite an attempted denial, eventually got their touchdown. The Orcs continued their onslaught, eventually cracking the Goblins' second defence before stealing the ball and going for the 2-0 win, but not before beating the Little Blighters into the ground some more and leaving the Goblins' apothecary feeling a little more than overwhelmed. Last week saw the Bretonnians clinch the win against the mighty Chaos team who have had the most abysmal luck this season. What their game against the Dwarves has shown though, is that this bad luck could quite possibly be contagious. Either that or a particularly angry Chaos fan from last week just wanted to get revenge. An early break down the left field looked to put the Bretonnians in a good spot, but the Shining Prince got a bit too hot-headed and spent so much time posturing to a group of maidens in the stands that he forgot that he was meant to be running up the field. The Dwarves capitalised on this blunder, and from that moment on, it was all downhill for the Bretonnians. The rest of their half consisted of failing to recover the ball and taking a beating in the process, before the Dwarves scored in turn 8 to take the lead. Things went from bad to worse, as it turns out the Bretonnians didn't like the cheap booze provided by the Bloodwiser babes, or perhaps they just didn't want to suffer a second dwarven concussion. Either way, it meant the second half drive was only set up with 7 players. 7 quickly became 6, which became 5, and you see the pattern here. With their numbers declining quicker than peasants in a plague, it was almost too easy for the dwarves to score a second touchdown. With the bodies piled high, the Chaos Warbands saw their opportunity to invade the pitch and dish out some final payback to the remaining Bretonnians. A single blocker was left standing, and he bravely took on the entire dwarf team, but was quickly punished. This beating resulted in a comfortable 3-0 victory for the dwarves and an uncomfortable overnight hospital stay for 90% of the Bretonnian players. The Underworld team has shown so far this season that stunty means nothing, and whilst the Chaos on the other hand have shown that Armour 8 is also irrelevant. Regardless, the Chaos looked to get their first win and to give the Underworld their first defeat. An Underworld receive resulted in a blistering and brave charge down the midfield, which ultimately resulted in a fairly quick turn 5 touchdown from the Skaven players. The Chaos attempted to respond, but the Underworld defence was just too strong, and a couple of early casualties had hindered the Chaos' ability to secure the counter touchdown. During the second half, the combination of injuries and the continuation of last week's bad luck saw the Chaos stopped at every turn. Exploiting this weakness, the Underworld team managed to steal the ball and even take the time to give it to a blitzer in order to score the second touchdown and extend the Underworld's unbeaten streak to 3 games. The final game of the week had the Kislev attempting to take on yet another of the top performing teams so far, the Ogres. Once again looking to make use of their pace and leaping, perhaps this would be the game where this strat would pan out against a superior Bashy team. An unfortunate pair of skulls on turn 2 left the Ogres' left flank wide open, allowing the Kislev to dart through and cause some damage, and with a couple of Ogres taking prolonged naps, the Kislev felt their confidence rising, even risking the short pass to score in turn 4. The Ogres looked to return the favour, punching a forceful hole through the Kislev's defence. With some desperate screening and marking, the Kislev managed to withstand the Ogres' onslaught until...
Oh fuck! Yes! Diving tackle! Either way. Thank fuck for break tackle!
Oh fucking hell!
Yes, the Ogres once again proved that they are actually elves trapped in brutish bodies. Aware now that they needed to withstand 8 turns of abuse, the Kislev took an aggressive defence. But the Ogres continued their nonsensical passing game and quickly moved the ball at the pitch. Repeated marking and blitzes stalled the Ogres once more, forcing them to eventually resort to a more desperate play. But this time, unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and the Kislev earned their first and well-deserved point of the season. And that's all 6 games this week. The league is starting to take some real shape, with a couple of teams being labelled as the ones to beat, specifically the Khemri, Lizardmen, and the surprise contenders, the Underworld, after their 2-0 victory against the Chaos this week. The mid-table remains close, with most teams suffering a mix of wins, draws and losses, and shuffling around slightly from last week. The bottom 4 are now at risk from drifting more than a win away from the other 8, but with 8 weeks worth of games remaining, there is still plenty of time for any team to recover. And that's all for this week. As always, if you want to catch any of our games live, check out our Twitch and our Twitter to find out when they'll be airing. If you want to join in on the action, come join us on Discord for a chat, game, or just to see what's what. If you want to know more about the league, head over to our website as it has all the full standings, schedule and results for this and all of the previous seasons as well. Thank you once again for watching, and may Nuffle bless you all.
Deja vu, I just been in this place.